Most people that play through Elden Ring or any of the Souls games are going to follow a pretty standard pattern. They're going to find a weapon they like, they're going to put it in their hands, and they're not even going to have a single semblance of an idea of what things such as hard swapping, soft swapping, or menu setup is. Because why would they? You only really need one weapon to play through these games, but they're most likely going to have their first contact with these ideas when they fight someone in PvP who swaps to something other than what they were just using quickly, throwing them off guard and killing them. Usually these people will go to Reddit and make a entire discussion thread about how hard swapping is an unintended mechanic, but then there might be those mature couple that are going to realize that, hey, I can maybe do that too and want to learn. For people like that, this series is going to be for you. So today we're going to go over the absolute basics of swapping. So soft swapping is going to be pretty standard stuff. It is swapping between what is in your left and right hand. If you can afford to do this, it's actually going to be in a lot of situations better to do this in Elden Ring. See, when you get hit by another player, you are going to be locked out of swapping your weapons. So if you have the endurance to be able to equip other things in your other hands, then this is a very practical thing to do. However, it's undeniable that you are going to need to hard swap at certain times. Enter your menu quickly and swap to a different weapon that complements the situation. And what you may be wondering is, how do you know that you're making a good decision? How do I know that I'm choosing the right thing at the right time? How do I make sure that I'm able to do it fast? Well, there's some basic things you're going to need to know. So we'll first start with what your inventory has in it. So these first 6 slots are going to be for your weapons, these 4 are for your armor, these are for your talismans, and generally you're not going to really be swapping any of these other ones, so they're not really worth mentioning. We're going to mostly focus on weapons today, but we're going to keep it super simple. Essentially, rather than having a bunch of different things we're going to go over, we're going to go over ideas that you want to keep in mind for invasions, and make it as simple as possible and limit that idea down to one weapon or one setup. So you may want to take notes because you're going to understand how you go from having a normal looking inventory to something more so like this. Believe it or not, every single placement of item in this inventory has a time and a purpose, and they are laid out in a way to where I have a full grasp of what I want at any given time. So let's start off with the basics so we can get to understanding something as monstrous as an inventory like this. So first thing we need to do is choose a main weapon. Now remember, I'm only going to give one example of each single idea that I'm talking about. You can have a bunch of different weapons in your arsenal that could count as your primary weapon at any given time, but for this example we're going to do one. So we're going to choose a weapon that is both pretty damn strong and also a personal favorite of mine, which is a curved sword. The Shamshir is generally considered, when it comes to two-handing, the best curved sword in the game. You will usually see me using the scimitar, but the Shamshir is better, so we will use it as our example. So the first thing that you want to consider, once you have gotten your primary weapon, is what are the weaknesses of what I'm using? So for the curved sword, for example, you have a buttery smooth weapon that is going to be very good at roll catching. It's going to be very good at outspacing your opponent, assuming that they're not using a weapon that is atrociously longer than yours. But you're going to run into a couple problems. So first things first, because you're using just one curved sword, you're not going to be doing the world's most damage. Power stance weapons and Ashes of War are often going to outdamage you, and people are often not going to respect your space because they feel like they are able to just run you down. So this gives you a couple issues. You can run into a problem where someone is too far away to finish them, because curved swords generally are not very long, and also if someone wants to run you down with 2 people, then you're going to run into a lot of issues. So what do we do in terms of choosing a weapon that is going to be able to be a good swap to keep us from running into these problems as hard as we would otherwise? There's a couple different ways we could solve a damage problem. So like I said, it's not that a curved sword's damage is bad, it's just it certainly is not the highest, and oftentimes it won't garner respect from people. So something you can do is you can have power stance curved sword at the ready. You can still be two-handing your curved sword, doing your thing, and then if the time comes where you need some higher damage, you can swap to your power stance setup. This is technically a soft swap, but it is still definitely viable. And the thing is you may not have that second curve sword equipped, and then you see that, hey, maybe I do actually need that, and then you can go ahead and put it on your hip and have it at the ready. A way that you can solve a distance issue, say someone is rolling far away with light roll or they are just hard to reach, then something you can have is, say, a halberd. A halberd is going to have a very quick, fast, and long distance running R1, and it's very good for roll catching people and keeping right on top of them with its forward momentum and its range. This is going to be a fantastic option if someone's getting too far and you're not able to do much about it. Another way that you can solve this problem is with the running R1 of something, say, like the dismounter. So this is more telegraphed. People are going to have an easier time reacting to this, but this also has a ridiculous amount of range. So this is also a perfectly fine option as well. But while we're on the curved greatsword, another fantastic option for getting people to respect you if they're trying to all trample on top of you is you can have a weapon that has a horizontal, large, sweeping hitbox, such as the dismounter. And then there are other examples as well, but this is perhaps one that is particularly practical due to the weapon also just being very strong outside of it just being a very wide sweeping hitbox. It also has a fantastic R2, it is very easy to use, and it has hyper armor. So this is a fantastic weapon for getting a little bit more respect out of your opponent. And since it's so easy to use, that also comes with the benefit of you being less likely to drop a kill in quotation due to having done something that wouldn't work otherwise. There's a couple ideas for weapons in Ashes of War that every single build is going to want, regardless of what you're using. So for example, you're going to want a weapon that has Endure. As an invader, there is not a more necessary Ash of War than Endure. It is going to be all too common that you are getting swarmed by multiple people, stuck in corners, and getting trapped and body blocked. And sometimes, a lot of the time actually, your only way to get out is to endure and try to go for some evasive maneuver. So make sure that it is at the very least a support weapon that is able to have endure put on it, or you can have it on your main setup. Both are perfectly fine options. Something that you're also going to want very close to your main swap is going to be something that is called a Get Off Me tool. So every single build is going to have its own flavor of Get Off Me tool. For builds like Strength and Dexterity, oftentimes what they're going to use is the Stormhawk Axe. Essentially what a Get Off Me tool is trying to do is have something that threatens to two or one-shot somebody while also being able to hit everybody in its AoE. So oftentimes for a Strength or Dexterity character, this right here is going to be doing upwards of 1,000 damage if all three of those initial hits land. And then also you can follow it up by pressing the Ash of War button again, and oftentimes one of those two hits and the second one will roll catch someone trying to roll out. This is an extremely dangerous Ash of War that will get people off your ass. So you're going to be using this a lot on a Dexterity or Strength character. But let's use a different build as an example. What if you're running a Strength build and you're using something simple like the Claymore? The Claymore has quite a couple problems with it actually, but it has a couple that are pretty well pronounced. So this is going to be our first example of one that we're going to at the very least have two different swaps for to make up for its shortcomings. So the first one is that the Claymore, despite being a hyper armor weapon, is going to have a severe issue when it comes to people trying to crowd you, or say one person is attacking you from your front and then someone trying to circle around you. Since almost none of your attacks are going to be horizontal and also quick, you're going to have a big problem when you're fighting two people at the same time or even three people at the same time. It's going to be difficult any time you're doing that. And also, because all of the attacks are very reactable, you're not going to have a very good chase down ability with the Claymore. While yes, your running R1 has a ton of forward momentum, it is extremely easy to reaction roll this attack. So the only time that someone's not going to roll it is because they thought they were out of range, you guys have some latency, and you ended up hitting them anyway. So there's a couple things we can do to remedy this problem. So the first one, once again as an example, is a Get Off Me tool. When people are trying to swarm you, you are going to want a Get Off Me tool, which for strength builds oftentimes is going to be the Storm Axe as well. But also, say you are going to try and kill someone who is at very low HP. Well, there's a couple good examples for doing so. So a thrusting sword is extremely fast and very, very hard to react to, and the same thing goes for a dagger. Now, a dagger is going to have less range, of course, but it is going to be even harder to react to than a thrusting sword. Now, most people are going to prefer the thrusting sword due to being so much longer, but both are perfectly fine options. If you've just done some trading and you've got someone on the last lick of their HP, you can pull out either one of these options, and then you are going to have a much easier time wrapping them up. Let's use another example. Let's say you're an intelligence build using the Moonveil. Now, most people are not going to swap off of Moonveil if they're using it, because the Sash of War is so dangerous on its own that people don't feel a need to do anything else. But there are some definite issues that Moonveil will have, especially if you're fighting someone that's good. So first things first, you are so reliant on the Ash of War that what if you run out of FP? What if you don't have any more Cerulean Tears? Well, you have a significantly worse weapon is what you have, because while the Katana moveset is far from bad, a single Moonveil is not going to be a whole lot to scoff at by itself, and if you were relying on the Ash of War that hard beforehand, it's very likely that you're going to have a severe problem with your opponent now that they've outlasted all of your FP. So there's a couple different options in this regard. What you're going to want to do is pair the Moonveil with a swap that is going to be a very good weapon without an Ash of War, before ever having considered one. So an example is to run Power Stance Nagakibas if you're a katana enjoyer. So these are obviously way longer of katanas, and the Power Stance katana moveset is super powerful for invasions. Both of your L1 variants are going to be extremely high damage. Not that one, this one. You're going to have the R1 moveset, which is very good at catching people with the back swings. You're going to have a great crouch R1, very quick and wide horizontal sweep. And then you're also going to have a couple good R1 attacks as well in your running and jumping R1s. These are great for hitting people with the phantom range when they weren't expecting it. So you don't necessarily need to run Power Stance Katanas with Moonveil, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just giving you an example of a moveset that is extremely good before ever having considered the Ash of War. If a moveset is really strong and then you get to add an Ash of War on top of that, hey, that's an awesome cherry on top. But the Moonveil needs to be accompanied by something that doesn't use so much FP. Now you're going to need a couple options as well that are going to be for specific matchups. Now, you could just use these weapons as your primaries, but what if you have a primary that doesn't handle one of these next situations all that well? Let's say you're fighting someone that is horrendously latent. Say they live on the other side of the globe from you. Well, the thing is that you're going to need something that is able to inflict a meaningful status effect to them. That way they can't roll forever and get through all of your phantom hits. So for a ton of builds, what people decide to use is a Ant Spur. This is going to be the strongest on strength and dexterity because you can infuse it with either heavy or keen respectively, and then use some of the, what do you call them, the rot greases right here, the drawstring rot greases, to make it to where the scarlet rot is going to build up extremely fast, usually rotting someone in 1 or 2 phantom hits. This is going to be a fantastic option for about any build, but it is going to be the best on the physical damage ones. Intelligence and Faith are going to have a bit of a harder time with this. They can run the same idea, but the Ant Spur is going to be doing quite a bit less damage. But you're also going to have options in the form of, say, Sleep, Madness, Poison. Actually, for that reason, Arcane is actually kind of the undisputed king of latency fights, because you don't need Scarlet Rot per se on a Arcane build. You can absolutely run it, you still should, but you also get poison as well, and you inflict that extremely easily. Another thing you're going to see from time to time that you will need an answer to is someone who is light rolling. I believe I'm light rolling right now. Yes, I am. The thing is that light roll takes you far enough to where not every single weapon can run it down. Essentially, they're going to outdistance your roll catch attempt, even if they're panic rolling. So for this, you're going to need some type of attack that is extremely heavy with its forward momentum. So for example, even though these weapons are as short as they are, the Katars with this attack right here have so much forward momentum that this can keep up with someone with light roll. Another infamous example is going to be Power Stance Spears. This is perhaps the single strongest setup in the game for invasions or vice versa. So these are going to have a ton of range, a ton of forward momentum, and absolutely destroy light rollers. These things will eat them alive. And then, while not as good of an option, but still certainly can work, is the running R2 of a heavy thrusting sword. The reason this one does not work quite as well is because of how telegraphed this attack is, and it also not being paired weapons hitting, so it's not going to hit quite as hard usually. It will still work, it's just perhaps not the best option. Another type of swap you're going to want on any build is going to be something that is projectile based, whether that be an Ash of War or an actual ranged weapon. Now, I'm not going to go over every single example, but I'll go over a couple. So dexterity builds, for example, are going to have a very well-rounded plethora of projectile-based weaponry. So you have things such as Thunderbolt, you're going to have another Ash of War in the form of Stormblade. This one's extremely good. Now granted, you can use this on more than dexterity, it's just particularly good on dex. You're also going to have Beast Roar, and you're going to have the unique Bolt of Grandsax, which is very slow, but if your opponent's not paying attention will do a ton of damage. Now, the undisputed king when it comes to projectiles is far and away an intelligence build. I'm not even going to go over all of the different spells you could use, I'm just going to go over the Ashes of War. These are going to be some of the most powerful ones you can go for, things such as Transient Moonlight, or say something like the Ash of War on the Glintstone Chris. This is going to cost very little FP, have a ton of damage and range, and become even more damaging if you do the charge variation. While a strength build can use a lot of the generalist Ashes of War, say a dexterity build can, what is going to set it apart from every other build type in the game is going to be your great bow damage, especially with the Golem bow. Now, the Golem arrows are going to be single-handedly the strongest thing in the entire game for invasions. A great bow with Golem arrows is absolutely ridiculous with its utility, its damage, and its consistency, but a strength build is going to take this damage to an absolute different level. Whereas most Golem arrow shots are going to be doing about 300 or so damage on any other type of archetype, a dedicated strength build is going to be hitting 500, 600 damage on those Golem arrow shots, and that is a huge difference when it comes to how much respect your opponent is going to give you. When it comes to the different shields, there's a couple different options you have. Now, just about what any build is going to want to use are these four right here. You're going to have a Spiral Horn shield for your status resistances, a Twin Bird shield for increasing your attack and defense at low HP. You can choose to have a Turtle Shell, which will give you better stamina regeneration, and then the Icon shield will heal you 2 HP per second while it is out on your character. If you have at least 16 strength, the Brass Shield is going to be the best medium shield to use because it has such high guard boost, and if you're running a strength build, then you have an entire plethora of great shields you could use. However, if you're going to run one shield on your build, the most important thing is that it has Holy Ground. This is going to be an Ash of War that is going to quickly regenerate your HP as long as you are within this field. Just this one Ash of War alone is going to be enough to heal most characters up to between 30 and 50% of their max HP. So if you have enough time to break off from the fight, this is a very good way of getting your HP back without using any of your Crimson Tears. Assuming you're not using a Faith character, which will most likely use almost every single different type of seal for a different type of damage, the best seal you can have on any other type of build is going to be the Frenzy Flame seal by a lot. It's going to have no requirements at all, it's going to weigh absolutely nothing, and you have to do the Frenzy Flame quest if you are going to get this, but that's okay, because the strongest item that you can have in the game other than, say, Starlight Shards is going to be the Frenzy Flame Stone. So this item is going to act as a warming stone, but it only works for people that are Chaos followers. Essentially, if someone that is not a Chaos follower is inside of its reticle, they will start rapidly building up Frenzy, and that essentially dissuades most people from wanting to get into your bubble of healing. The crazy thing is, however, is that these two are going to stack together, and with the aforementioned Holy Land, you're going to be regenerating too much HP sometimes. It's absolutely insane. So you should be going for this ending of the game just so you can use this one item already, and then you add on top of that the best seal in the game for any non-Faith character. This is the one you want to be going for, essentially at any and all times. But with that being said, this is going to be about all that we go over for episode 1. Like I said, this is just going to be the absolute basics. I only wanted to show one or a couple examples of each general idea that you're going for when you're choosing what weapons are going to comprise of your menu. When it comes to actually swapping quickly and other things you may want to consider, we will go over that in upcoming episodes. With that being said, I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.